I never imagined I'd be in this situation. Everything had been going so well between us. For months, I had been so sure that he was the one. We'd laugh together, make plans for the future, and share intimate moments that made me feel like I was living in some perfect little world. He was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: attentive, kind, supportive. It wasn't just the big things that kept me hooked, it was the small gestures too, the way he'd send me sweet texts in the middle of the day, or how he'd always make sure I was okay after a stressful day at work. There were times I'd look at him and think, this is it. I'm so lucky. But then, slowly, little things began to feel off. At first, it was small things like how he'd suddenly start leaving his phone face down whenever we were together. I thought nothing of it at first. Maybe it was just a habit, or maybe he didn't want distractions. Then came the late nights. He'd tell me he was working late at the office, but I couldn't help but feel that familiar gut feeling that something wasn't right. It was the way he'd come home from these late nights, looking a little too disheveled, his cologne a bit stronger than usual. When I asked him about it, he'd smile and say it was just a long day, that I was overthinking things, and I wanted to believe him. I really did. But my mind kept racing. The quiet, nagging voice in my head wouldn't let it go. One night when he was in the shower, I grabbed his phone. I knew I shouldn't have, but I had to. It wasn't just my gut feeling anymore, it was an undeniable need to know the truth. The moment I saw the message, I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. A text from Rachel, one I'd never heard him mention, with a flirty message that made my stomach twist. I froze. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. I had to know if I was crazy or if something was really wrong. I unlocked his phone, and there it was, proof. Pictures, intimate messages, everything. He'd been seeing her behind my back, and I had been completely oblivious. My heart shattered, and all the trust I had built up with him crumbled. I felt sick. I didn't know what to do next. I stood there for what felt like hours, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. The man I had trusted with everything had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The shock hit me first. I stood there, staring at his phone, unable to process what I was seeing. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. There was no way the man I had shared so much with, someone I trusted completely, could be doing this to me. But there it was, in black and white. The messages, the pictures, the flirtation. Everything I thought I knew about our relationship suddenly felt like a lie. At first, I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen in disbelief. I wanted to cry, scream, something, anything, but I couldn't. I felt empty, like a part of me was ripped out and left behind. All the moments we had shared, all the things I had believed were real, felt like they had been stripped away in an instant. How had I missed all the signs? How had I let him get away with it? The anger started to bubble up, slow at first, then growing stronger with every second that passed. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I thought about all the things he'd said to me in the last few months, all the times he'd promised he loved me, all the little moments when he made me feel special. And now I realized it was all just an act. He had been pretending, stringing me along while sneaking behind my back with someone else. I felt so stupid for not seeing it sooner. My mind replayed every conversation we'd had where he'd reassured me that everything was fine. "You're overthinking it," he'd said. Nothing's going on, and all the time he'd been lying. I couldn't even look at him when he came out of the bathroom. The sight of him made my stomach turn. How could he stand there, knowing what he'd done, and act like everything was normal? I wanted to confront him right there, to scream at him, to make him feel the pain he had caused me. But I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. I needed time to process, to figure out what I wanted to do next. My mind was racing with thoughts of revenge, of making him feel what he had put me through. But for now, all I could do was hold it in, to sit with the anger and betrayal that were consuming me. As he went about his usual routine, completely unaware that I knew, I realized that I couldn't just walk away. I needed something more. I needed him to feel the hurt I was feeling. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that confronting him wasn't going to be enough. I could yell, cry, break up with him, but that wouldn't give me the satisfaction I needed. That wouldn't make him understand the depth of what he had done, the pain he'd caused me. No, I needed something bigger, something that would hit him in a way he'd never expect. That's when it came to me, his dad. He had always looked up to his father. They were close, like best friends. His dad had been there for him through everything. I knew how much he respected him, how much he needed him. And that's exactly why getting back at him through his father would be so powerful. It would destroy him in a way nothing else could. The thought made my blood rush, and a twisted sense of satisfaction crept in. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was dangerous. But I didn't care. I was done being the victim. I wanted him to feel what I felt, to understand the cost of betrayal. I started to think about how I could make this work. I had always gotten along with his dad. He was kind, supportive, and someone I could talk to easily. Over time, we'd shared a lot of laughs and even some personal stories about relationships, family, and life in general. He was older, yes, but there was something about him that drew me in. I wasn't looking for romance, at least not at first. I was just looking for a way to get close enough to him to make my plan work. I began reaching out to him more often, casually at first. It started with simple texts, questions about how he was doing or whether he needed help with anything. I knew I had to be careful. If he suspected anything, the whole thing would fall apart. I didn't want to look obvious or like I was trying too hard. I needed to be subtle, like I was just being friendly, supportive. But the more we talked, the more I realized he was open to the attention. He enjoyed it, and I could tell he appreciated my company. There were moments where I could see that he might even be interested, though I wasn't sure how far it would go. It was a dangerous game I was playing, but the more time I spent with him, the more I could see how easily I could pull this off. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt that maybe, just maybe, this was the only way I could finally get even. It wasn't long before I realized that the lines between what I was doing and what I felt were starting to blur. At first, it was all about revenge. I told myself that getting close to his dad wasn't about anything more than making him feel the same betrayal I had felt. But the more time I spent with him, the more complicated it became. His dad had this way of making me feel seen in a way that my boyfriend hadn't for a while. The conversations, the attention, the kindness, it all felt so different from what I had been getting in my own relationship. It wasn't just about hurting my boyfriend anymore. I was starting to feel something for his dad. We spent more time together. At first, it was small things, helping him with errands, sharing a coffee after a long day. There was this ease between us, a comfort that I hadn't realized I was missing. I'd laugh at his jokes, and he'd look at me like I was the only person in the room. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me longer than usual, and I could tell he was thinking something more. I wasn't sure how much of it was me projecting my emotions onto the situation, but I couldn't ignore the spark. There were moments when I thought he might be feeling the same way. Eventually, things started escalating. He would send me little texts, asking how my day was or if I was free to hang out. It was innocent at first, but I started noticing the tone of his messages change. They were a little more flirtatious, a little more personal, and every time I saw him, I couldn't deny the chemistry that had started to build between us. It was almost like we were dancing around something unspoken. It felt wrong, but at the same time, it felt undeniable. I had the power now, not just over my boyfriend, but over his dad, too. One night, it all came to a head. We were having a drink at his house, just the two of us, talking about life. The conversation was light at first, but there was this shift in the air. I could see it in the way he was looking at me, the way his hand brushed against mine. There was a moment where time seemed to stop, and everything felt like it was in slow motion. He leaned in, and without thinking, I kissed him. The kiss was everything I had been craving, passionate, intense, full of desire. It was as if all the pain I'd been carrying melted away, replaced by the thrill of the revenge I'd been plotting. I couldn't help but feel powerful, in control of something I had no right to. But even as the kiss deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line I could never come back from. The guilt started to creep in, but it was quickly drowned out by the rush of satisfaction. This was it. I had done it. I had gotten the ultimate payback, and it felt terrifyingly good. The fallout was inevitable. It wasn't long after that night that everything came crashing down. I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever, and the truth was, I wasn't even sure I wanted to anymore. Part of me wanted him to know, to see the damage I'd done, to finally understand how much he had hurt me, but I never imagined it would unfold like this. It started with a text from my boyfriend. It was a simple message just asking if we could talk. I could tell from the tone that something had shifted, but I didn't realize how close to the edge everything was until he showed up at my door that evening, looking furious and heartbroken all at once. His eyes searched mine, desperate for an explanation, but he didn't even need to ask. I could see the realization in his face before the words even left his mouth. He knew. I hadn't expected him to react like this. I thought he would be angry, of course, I knew he would be, but there was this rawness to his pain, a depth of betrayal that almost shocked me. For a moment I almost felt guilty, but the feeling was fleeting. He had cheated on me first. He had lied, and I had simply returned the favor, in a way he would never have anticipated. He couldn't get his words out fast enough, accusing me of destroying everything. He demanded to know how I could do something like this to him, how I could cross that line with his dad. But I just stood there, looking at him, watching him squirm, watching his world fall apart. He had no idea how much I had suffered. He had no idea how much he had broken me. And now he was reaping the consequences. For a long time we stood there in silence, the weight of everything hanging in the air between us. I didn't feel an ounce of regret. There was no part of me that wanted to take it back. I didn't even feel bad when he finally yelled at me, telling me I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. His words stung, but they didn't break me. The final blow came when he left. He slammed the door behind him, leaving me standing there, alone. I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was over for real this time. I had gotten even, and he would never forget it. The pain he had put me through was now his to carry. In the days that followed, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. Yes, I had avenged myself. Yes, I had made him feel the sting of betrayal. But I also realized something. Revenge, as sweet as it had been, hadn't healed me. It hadn't made the hurt go away. It had given me closure, sure, but it hadn't fixed the hole he had left in my life. I had won in a way, but in the end, we both lost.